What would you do if someone waltzed into a crowded restaurant and blatantly skipped the line? Would you bite your tongue or call them out? This story from a busy KFC on South King Drive is a perfect example of why speaking up can sometimes change everything. It was a chaotic afternoon at KFC, the kind where the line stretched almost to the door. Everyone in the room was quietly clinging to their patience, each person calculating how soon they could grab their food and get on with their day. Among them was Jamal, a young black man in his late 20s. Jamal had just finished a grueling shift at work. His shirt was still slightly wrinkled, and his tie hung loosely around his neck. Despite his fatigue, his mood was light. He was chatting on the phone with a friend, occasionally laughing at jokes, his laughter a brief relief from the buzz of the restaurant. Just as he hung up, the door swung open with dramatic force, and in walked Scott. Now, Scott was the kind of guy who carried himself like the world owed him a favour. He had on a sharp suit and an expression that screamed entitlement. Without even glancing at the long line, he strode straight to the counter, his expensive shoes clicking on the tiled floor like he was walking into his own office. The room fell into an awkward silence. Conversations halted, fries halfway to mouths. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Did he just skip the line? Jamal blinked, convinced for a moment that he'd imagined it. But there Scott stood, leaning on the counter like the rest of them were invisible. Jamal's disbelief turned to irritation. He glanced around the room, expecting someone to speak up. The older woman in front of him frowned but said nothing. The teenager behind him muttered something to her friend but avoided eye contact with Scott. Finally, Jamal stepped forward. "Hey man," he called out, his voice firm but calm. "There's a line here. We've all been waiting." Scott turned slowly, as if Jamal's words were barely worth his attention. He gave a half smirk and a shrug, then turned back to the cashier without a word. Jamal felt a surge of anger. He wasn't the kind of person to start trouble, but this was blatant disrespect. He locked eyes with the cashier, whose name tag read, Billy. "Excuse me, Billy," Jamal said, his voice rising slightly. "Are you seriously going to let this guy cut in front of everyone?" Billy, a young guy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, barely glanced up. He muttered something under his breath, words Jamal couldn't fully catch but knew weren't exactly polite. "Just wait your turn," Billy said, waving Jamal off like an annoying fly. The audacity made Jamal's blood boil. "Wait my turn? I've been waiting. We've all been waiting. You're really going to serve him first?" He shot back, his voice now carrying through the room. The tension in the air thickened. Other customers started murmuring, a few nodding in agreement. Even the older woman in front of Jamal gave an approving look, silently encouraging him. Billy sighed, clearly annoyed. "Look man, just stay in line, all right? I don't need your attitude," he snapped, his tone dripping with condescension. But Jamal wasn't backing down. "My attitude? The only problem here is that you're letting him cut and treating the rest of us like we don't matter," he said, his voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. Billy's face darkened. He slammed the counter and stormed out from behind it, marching straight up to Jamal. The crowd gasped, phones discreetly coming out to record. "You think you can tell me how to do my job?" Billy snarled, getting in Jamal's face. Jamal squared, his shoulders refusing to be intimidated. "I'm not telling you how to do your job. I'm just asking you to do it fairly," he replied, his tone calm but firm. The room felt like it might explode. Then, as if the tension wasn't high enough, Billy shoved Jamal. It was the spark that ignited the fire. Jamal stumbled back, but quickly regained his footing. He wasn't looking for a fight, but now he had no choice but to defend himself. The two men were suddenly in a heated scuffle. Customers screamed, employees yelled, and someone ran to call the police. The chaos was like a scene from a movie: spilled drinks, overturned chairs, and the sound of fists hitting flesh. Within minutes, the flashing lights of police cars lit up the windows. Two officers burst in, quickly separating the two men. Jamal, panting, stepped back with his hands raised, trying to explain. Billy, on the other hand, smirked confidently, clearly expecting Jamal to be the one dragged out in cuffs. The officers listened to both sides, but the stories were so conflicting that it was hard to piece together what had really happened. Then, One officer noticed a security camera above the counter. "Let's take a look at the footage," he suggested. Billy's smirk faltered. The officers reviewed the tape and the truth unravelled. The footage clearly showed Scott bypassing the line, Jamal politely addressing the issue, and Billy escalating the situation with his dismissive behaviour. The final blow was the moment Billy shoved Jamal, caught in crystal clear detail. The officers turned to Billy. "Looks like you're the one who started this," one said firmly. Billy stammered, trying to defend himself, but the evidence spoke, louder than his words. The officers escorted him out of the restaurant, charging him with harassment and disorderly conduct. Scott, meanwhile, had slinked into a corner, hoping to avoid attention. But he wasn't off the hook. The officers pulled him aside to question him about his role in the chaos. As the tension finally eased, Jamal felt a wave of relief. Other customers clapped quietly, a few offering him words of encouragement as he walked out. He hadn't just stood up for himself, he'd stood up for everyone in that line. And justice? It had been served, extra crispy, just like the chicken. You enjoyed this story? Make sure to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button and share this video with your friends. Who knows, maybe you'll be the hero in your own story someday. Stay bold, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next video.